Hello, everyone. Welcome to another episode of the 8-Bit Adventures podcast, bringing you the latest and greatest geeky news of the week. It's another solo cast this week, so I am your host, Sean Hayes. My co-host, Courtney Bolin, is on vacation this week, and so she will not be joining us. So really, the big news this week is the Nintendo Direct today. So that's pretty much what this episode is going to focus on. So yeah, why don't we get right into that and not waste time, shall we? There's a lot to cover here. There's a lot to unpack. All right, so basically, yeah. So at 5 p.m. Eastern Daylight Time today, Nintendo had, and probably the first time in a year, maybe more, a full-fledged Direct. So not a Direct Mini, not an indie showcase, a full-fledged Direct. So I got a whole laundry list of items. So a lot of announcements, a lot of stuff coming out like within the next month or two, as well as some items that are a bit further off. So we saw things like Apex Legends, which comes out on March 9th. I'm going to run through stuff that like is already out but is being ported to Switch. Ghosts and Goblins Resurrection, which is next week on February 25th. Let's see, blah, blah, blah. Fall Guys. Fall Guys is coming to Switch this summer. We've got Capcom Arcade Stadium, which is sort of like one of those compilation collections. Has a lot of features that it seems like NES Online has. That is available today, like right now. Plants vs. Zombies Battle for Neighborville. I assume this is a port. On March 19th. So this is almost like an Overwatch style Plants vs. Zombies game. So it's not like if you're used to the tower, like 2D tower defense type game, this is not that. This is more in line with what is it? Garden Warfare, but also a bit more of like a team-based arcade shooter. Let's see, looking for stuff specifically that's Star Wars Hunters. I didn't get a chance to write down the release date for that. Knockout City, May 21st. Hades is getting a physical release March 19th. And with that will be included a digital download code for the game's soundtrack, as well as an art book. Is like a mini book, I guess. Let's see, Ninja Gaiden Sigma Master Collection. So Ninja Gaiden Sigma 1, 2, and 3 on June 10th. Yeah, so that pretty much covers all the ports. And presumably, DC Superhero Girls Teen Power on June 4th. So some of the other stuff that we saw, Saga Frontier Remastered. Definitely going to talk about this later, because I'm excited for this. April 15th. Legend of Mana Remaster. Monster Hunter Rise, of course, March 26th. We saw some new and returning monsters for that. Mario Golf Super Rush. Going to talk about this a little bit later, too. On June 25th. Tales from the Borderlands. Forgot that on ports. On March 24th. Stubbs the Zombie in Rebel Without a Pulse. This is you play as a zombie, and your goal is to like infect other people. And basically, if you played World of Warcraft during the Wrath launch event, this is like that, but a whole game. You're playing as a zombie with the goal of getting revenge on humans, and infecting other zombies and creating other zombies to take over the city. No More Heroes final No More Heroes 3, August 27th. So that is finally got a release date, finally coming out. So everybody's, I'm sure, pretty excited about that. Neon White, which is some kind of like card-based first-person shooter game where you're an assassin in heaven. I don't know. Seemed a little weird. That is winter 2021. Miitopia, which is for those that had a 3DS. If you recall, there was that game that came. Like, it was kind of the standard software that came with the 3DS. Was a game where you took the Miis that you had on your system and you were able to send them out on like a little mission type thing. I forget the name of it, like Story Quest or something. It seems to like take inspiration from that and created like a more fully fleshed out game from it. So it uses your Miis both as like the good guys and bad guys. It's got like a Dark Lord fantasy RPG, so you build relationships within members of your party and stuff. So that seems pretty interesting. The Animal Crossing Super Mario event is it like has the update on the 25th of February, and then the actual event starts March 1st. One of the cool things about this is you'll be able to get warp pipes and put them on your island to allow you to warp from one point of your island to another. So that is actually a really cool utilitarian feature. Excuse me. That's not just for decorative purposes. Like, you put it on opposite ends of the island, and now you essentially have like 2 warp points on your island. All right. Square Enix, keeping up their tradition of terrible names. Project Triangle Strategy is a turn-based tactical RPG. That I mean, they touted a whole bunch of stuff, but it's like these aren't really new mechanics of decisions will affect the story and things like that. That's a lie, Mr. York. Calling you out on that. Also, I don't know. I fully expect this to just be called like some Final Fantasy Tactics subtitle here, because I mean they could have just named it that. They've already used the Final Fantasy Tactics brand to have wildly different stories. So, the Octopath team. Okay, I could see that. And basically taking the engine that they had to adapt it to a tactical RPG. Yeah, it looks very visually similar to Octopath Traveler. I do like it also takes some elements from like Divinity, and what Larian's doing with like environmental effects. So that like if there's water, you can shock it, or you can light stuff on, like you can light the environment on fire. Seems pretty cool. So let's see. World's End Club from the team that works on Danganronpa. That is May 28th. So it's similar to that game where you play as like a bunch of students, and some sort of otherworldly fae-like figure is like, we're gonna play a game and you're all gonna die, and then you have to survive. So, yeah, spoilers. So, no new Breath of the Wild 2 news aside from development is going smoothly. Skyward Sword HD Edition, which has been pretty highly requested. So I will say, for me, it actually kind of resolves a big detractor of the game where it's Joy-Cons for motion. So you are able to use the Joy-Cons for motion controls, but they also made it optional, and you will be able to just use a straight-up controller scheme for that. So I think that dramatically changes the game. It looks like the way they're going to do it is you're going to use the right thumbstick to control your sword in combat, because it really played into attacking enemies from different angles. to counteract their shields. So, um, yeah, I think this will actually be pretty good. Skyward Sword was it was a decent Zelda game that had a bunch of really big flaws. One of which being the control scheme. Um, Also because there was no left-handed control scheme um, that you couldn't mirror it. Um, so if you're left-handed like me, you basically had to awkwardly try and play that game. Or what I eventually ended up doing was just played it left-handed, and turns out like that kind of breaks the game because you end up confusing enemies that way. But that was a pretty big reveal. That is coming out July 16th, so no announcement up until then. My guess is that it's probably being worked on by a third-party developer that's working on the port. Nintendo has done that with other Zelda titles in the past for their HD editions, um, with some assistance from like the Zelda team to get stuff working. And they're also releasing a special set of Joy-Cons to go with it. They actually look pretty cool. I dig those. I dig those pretty nicely. Hyrule Warriors Age of Calamity is getting an expansion pass. Looks like it's just going to have a bit of extra content, but mostly cosmetics. They did a quick run through of some of the stuff, and it looked largely kind of extra things that don't really add a whole lot to the game. Maybe like a couple extra levels. Bravely Default 2, they talked about. That comes out next week. We'll likely be playing that on stream a bit. Oh, another thing about Project Triangle Strategy, there's a demo available today to test that game out. So I haven't gotten a chance to download it yet, but I am going to download that and play it and see what I think. And Splatoon 3, which I know there's a lot of folks that'll be excited for that. Splatoon has been pretty well received and has been very successful as a new Nintendo IP. So yeah, it's basically Nintendo actually doing pretty well in a third-person shooter type game, especially a team-based like multiplayer one. And especially with sort of the revival of doing events for Splatoon 2 after they said they weren't going to have any more, I think was them kind of getting the community primed a little bit for this announcement. So that's going to come 2022, or slated for 2022. And then, as was mentioned in chat, Pyra and Mithra were unveiled as the latest characters for Smash. They're going to come in March. So this is a little interesting in that it's essentially a toggle between the two characters so that you can switch between the match. When that used to be the case for Zelda and Sheik, and then they split them out into two separate characters because they didn't like having a transformation be part of that character's aspect. So I think that's a little interesting that they're now bringing a character back in that has that. I think it's a little. I love the fact that they're trolling a little bit by not having Rex be the character that got put in. I think the only way that you could have made that even further is if you had one of the Napon as the character. You know, if you had either Tora or Ricky, would be amazing. If I just to troll the fan base. Trying to look if there's anything else that I missed in the list here. We covered Miitopia, Star Wars Hunters, World's End Club, Ninja Gaiden Sigma. Yeah, I think that's it. Just running through. So yeah, I think the big things. I'm really gonna enjoy getting to try out Saga Frontier, remastered. And I might actually pick up that Legend of Mana remaster. I really like how that art style looks. Um, and I'm really intrigued. So I've never played either of those games. Um, and I'm always kind of a sucker for that era of JRPGs. And especially since I have there somewhere I have and I've talked about this before. I have an issue of Electronic Gaming Monthly that has a whole big giant write up of Saga Frontier, and you know, middle school Sean's game design brain just like soaked all of that in, and looking at that from a perspective of just character designs from a mechanic standpoint, thought it was really interesting. Um, so I'm really excited to finally get the chance to actually play that, because I didn't have a PlayStation growing up. Um, so yeah, I'm really stoked for that. I'm stoked for Monster Hunter. So we saw Rajang uh, in the new footage that we got today. So the big bad monkey's coming back. Um, we saw some new monsters, a lot of monsters that have a similar, looks like a similar framework as Mizutsune, so that should be interesting. And it looks like we're getting locales from Monster Hunter World, which is really interesting. Um, or at the very least, like they're really similar to the Desert Wastes map, if it's not the same one. But it looked really close, to the point that like when they showed it, I had to do it up and be like, "Is Monster Hunter World coming to Switch?" Like that doesn't make any sense. Like it's got to be Rise. Um, but that'll be really interesting if they start putting, like if they start adapting maps from World for Rise, because I think the wire bug mechanics will add an interesting element to those maps. Um, so yeah, stoked about that. They also introduced this Apex element for stampedes or rampages, whatever they want to call them, so that you're gonna essentially fight through waves of existing monsters, and then you fight like the Apex monster that's in charge of it. Um, so it almost seems like a bit of either like a frenzy version or perhaps like a tempered version. Not sure. They didn't really go into a lot of details about it. So we'll be sure to stay tuned on that. What else? So like I said, I'm super excited for Triangle Strategy. I hope they rename it. Because that is an awful name. Uh, Monster Hunter, Legend of Mana, Saga Frontier. Um, I will probably pick up Splatoon 3. I didn't play through the whole campaign for Splatoon 2, and I did a little bit of the multiplayer stuff. I think multiplayer is tough if you don't have other people to play with. Um, just because there's people that are really good at that game, and I am not. So, yeah, it's definitely a tricky game to kind of wrap your head around. Um, Mario Golf. Mario Golf's interesting. So it's going to have a story mode where you create a me character and you play as your me character going through and meeting like Mushroom Kingdom people, um, and going through the story that way. Uh, like as you complete matches and courses, you'll get experience points that you use to upgrade your character stats. So things like control, speed, power. Um, there's also a speed mode where once everybody tees off, you then race. Like it's not everybody goes in turns. It's like everybody tees off at the same time, and then you book it to your ball's location, and your goal is to finish the hole first, but still get the lowest score on the hole. Uh, so and adding like power ups and stuff to it. So adding a little bit of like almost like a Mario Kart element, except you are running. Naruto running your way to the hole's location, or to the your ball's location. Um, Weird. Kind of like it. Oh, that's also a game where you can play with motion controls or with standard controller controls. And I think that's really nice. I like the option, um, to be able to do one or the other for adventure games and sports games and stuff like that. Um, so I think again it's a great move for Skyward Sword HD edition because uh, the thing that's held it back from getting re-released until now has been the motion control stuff. Um, just because it was such a problem and uh it required like the extra Wiimote attachment, um like the Wii Remote Plus. You had to have it in order to play that game. Um so I think, adding the extra controller support also increases the accessibility of the game. And that's something where, motion controls are great and fine, like for getting people active and moving and everything, but from an accessibility standpoint, it is limiting, because it forces you to play one particular way, um, that folks with or that are disabled, um, might have a difficult time playing that game. So adding controller support increases that accessibility. Um, it doesn't, because Nintendo doesn't have a gamepad like Xbox does, um, or the game board. I don't know what that product's actually called. Um, it's still a bit lacking in that department, but it opens it up to a broader audience. So little disappointing that there's no Breath of the Wild 2 news. Then again, I'm not surprised, um, just because I don't know what um, COVID's impact on development was. Like they said development's still going smoothly, but I mean, we also don't know at what point in development that game was in when it was announced. Like they just said it's in development. So or how big that game's going to be. Um I mean, if that game's in development for, 4 or 5 years, I mean, it could be as massive as Breath of the Wild and then some. Um my hope is my the dream for me is to get um Monolith. And I know Monolith is actually assisted with like the open world design for Breath of the Wild, but to like actually get like a little bit more collaboration and do something like truly massive and epic, I think would be good. Would be pretty interesting, and maybe even help a little bit on boss battle type stuff. Get some interesting mechanics in there. Um, so yeah, all in all, I mean, there was some really good stuff in there. There was a lot of stuff where it's just like, oh look, it's another you know team based arcade shooter type game. Uh, that like wasn't already on an existent IP. Um, but I mean, even factoring in that stuff like Splatoon 3, Apex Legends, Knockout City, Star Wars Hunters, Plants vs Zombies, Battle for Neighborville. Let's see. Is there anything else? No, that is it. Okay. But yeah, so that's still, 5 titles that all kind of fit into that genre. And it felt like a lot. One thing, Ghosts and Goblins Resurrection has a co-op mode. Sort of. It's basically the player 2 picks like one of 3 types of ghosts that assist player 1. So one is like you create barriers, like you create like shield bubbles. Another one is you can fly and carry the player, like in carry player 1. Um, and the third one is you can create bridges. Um, and it's what was it? Barry, Carrie, and Archie. uh, so yeah, I don't know. The art style is still a bit off-putting on that game for me, I think. Um, and I played through. What did we do on stream? Ghouls and Ghosts. Because we either did Ghouls and Ghosts or Ghosts and Goblins, and after getting through and like beating the game, then it's saying like, now do it again. No, thank you. I'm done. So, yeah. So that is gonna wrap up basically the Nintendo Direct. As far as other stuff going in, definitely gonna download that demo for Triangle Strategy and try that out. I worry that I kind of worry that it's just gonna be a little like that the story's gonna be a little generic. Um, and this was the problem that like Bravely Default 1 had, right? Was it was an awfully generic storyline, and like it didn't stand out. Like a lot of the themes had already been done before, um, with Final Fantasy. Uh, so my hope is that they're able to come up with stuff that like really stands out and grabs your attention. Um, but I'm concerned that it's not going to do that. Um, I don't know. I mean, they talk about like the Salt Iron War, which so I have to say, as far as like fantasy naming conventions go, like that is one that actually kind of hits the mark for being able to be easily remembered. Um, One of the things that I've done in my work on Tales of Jamora is like researching how things get their names to then come up with names for places and persons and things in Jamora. Um, and what I'm finding is names are really simple in real world Earth. Uh, like humans are really bad at naming things. We're very literal at naming things. And so, when you have a lot of fantasy games that come up with like these really out there fantastical names, uh, it's very easy to forget them just because it comes off as just nonsense and gobbledygook. Um, Whereas, much simpler names are easier to remember. Things that are like grounded in, even if it's just like a compound word, but of like two short words. So that's why I think things like Middle Earth and Hogwarts have staying power. Um, or if you're gonna put in the work, like Tolkien did to actually like create languages that have rules and structures and everything. Um, since he was a linguist. Uh, so yeah, yeah. I mean, it's why like although then again, like yeah, I mean, there's a lot of Zelda stuff that just seems nonsensical. Um, but I think they've been moving away from that a little bit um, in naming conventions. I mean, here's the thing, like Xenoblade 2, aside from Torna, if you ask me the names of any locations in that game, and I spent God probably like 140 hours playing that game, I can't tell you any of the names of the locations from that game. Uh, and in fact, I can barely remember the names of all the factions. So that's that's a thing. Um, but yeah. And then speaking of which, I mean, Pyra and Mithra, I'll be excited for that because I have the fighter pass. Um, I should take a dip into playing Smash again. I haven't played it in a while. Um, just trying out a lot of these new characters, and just getting a feel for it. Yeah, I think it's really hard to kind of justify playing Smash right now because number one, uh, online matches aren't super great at best. And for many people, it's still like the online experience is still downright awful. Um, and then, single player, like you only get so far, like until it's kind of like, okay, I'm just kind of doing the same thing. Um, like it really shines for like playing with your buddies on the couch. And we can't do that right now. Uh, so, that kind of puts a damper on playing Smash for me anyway. I know your mileage may vary, but yeah. So, um, yeah, I will say there is some stuff that really just doesn't interest me at all. Um, and this is even like the Age of Calamity expansion pass. Like, I'm not gonna pick this up. I mean, I did it for Breath of the Wild, and I felt like that was a worthwhile purchase. I don't know if this would be worthwhile. Um, I mean, the DC superhero girls. That is not. I'm not in the demographic for that. I don't think. Um, and the marketing for it was a little off putting for me. Um, so uh, also Knockout City. That was just it was bizarre. It was like they had a bunch of different characters in wildly different styles, um, talking about like being on teams and playing or whatever. So I was expecting like those characters and those styles to appear in the game, but then it was just they all appeared like generic, like slightly more comical Fortnite-esque characters with all the same art style. And so it was very confusing if that was just a marketing thing or if it somehow ties into the game, and that was not very clear. Um, and so it's like, nah, I'm out. uh, so yeah, all in all, I think it was pretty good. Um, with there was some stuff in there that didn't really interest me, and some stuff that kind of fell a bit flat. But yeah, I'm excited. I mean, there's a lot coming out pretty soon. Um, that I was not expecting. So definitely be a busy spring, that's for sure. Um, which means for the stream schedule, likely Bravely Default 2 into Monster Hunter into Saga Frontier Remastered. I think is going to be how that works. Um, maybe with a little bit of Animal Crossing sprinkled in there to show off the Mario stuff. Um, let's see if there's anything in May. Um, you know what? We might even do Metopia in May. I think Metopia might be the kind of game that does well for streaming, um, because you make the characters, and that's always a fun thing to do. Incorporate your community with. So, um, oh, and then Fall Guys. I mean, assuming Fall Guys is still a big streaming thing by that point. I mean, it's just going to increase the pool of players. Because I'm assuming it's crossplay, but I could be wrong. So yeah. Uh, and then just really quick, I mean that also kind of went into our deep dive, but I'm not going to play the sound effect for that. So I'll get into quest log. So quest log is where Courtney and I would normally go back and forth talking about what goals we achieved over the week, what goals we want to set for the week. I was bad. I didn't do any of my goals this past week, because, and patrons are able to see this up on the Patreon, is I've been working on some artwork for Tales of Jamora. Just taking our current cast of characters and kind of doing a little bit of a thought experiment on what they look like with this new direction that I want to take the campaign setting. Um, we still haven't made a decision for the current campaign. But everybody so far has been really really stoked to see their characters in the artwork, which I'm super proud of. So patrons can go see that. I'm gonna throw the link in the chat here. But it's patreon.com/8bitadventures. Uh, so yeah, I mean, it's things like, for folks that have followed the campaign in our podcast. So May, our resident sort of Sylvan elf rogue, is like a grunge style. So uh, flannel shirt tied off at the waist, beanie, ripped jeans, Doc Martens. Um, Jacobin, our heavy hitter paladin, is wearing armor that's sort of inspired by Warhammer 40k, sort of inspired by like Star Wars Mandalorian armor, a little bit of Transformers thrown in there, along with some aviators, captain's hat, like a yacht captain's hat. Um, and then Twixen, our Warforged esque bard, has been completely reimagined as um, a futuristic robot with elements inspired from Gundam, Daft Punk, Total Recall, um, with some electric instrument stuff going on there. Um, really excited for those. I have one more to do to complete the cast of main characters in our main show. But again, we haven't made any decisions really as far as what we're even going to do. Um, I'd imagine we will likely play offline a bit before we go back to streaming. Um, just because that was kind of the plan before, and then we had COVID spikes, and we had to stop playing again. So yeah, we'll see. But because I did that, I didn't color any comics or do any item icons. That turtle spirit in World of Warcraft, that is super elusive. I don't know what I'm doing wrong. Like, I followed a guide to try and get it, and I don't know if RNG is just not on my side. There seems to be conflicting information as to what is actually needed to do it, so I might be doing more than is necessary and actually expanding the loot table, um, which opens it up to include more things than what I should be getting if I want to focus on this one particular item. So who knows? As far as streams this week, unfortunately, nobody's voted on that poll, which means I'm gonna pick, and because I'm gonna be running dungeons, I think we're gonna stream some World of Warcraft Shadowlands this week. So if you want to see what a hunter's like in action in the dungeons or a specific dungeon, be sure to tune in for that. Next week we should be back to normal. Everybody should be back. Everybody, we all should be fine. Um, and then Bravely Default 2 comes out, so we may end up streaming that. And if that's the case, yeah, what I'll do is, I might create like 2 save files, like one for streaming and one for my own personal stuff offline, so that way if I want to go ahead and play through stuff, that way also to like figure out what like how to solve puzzles and everything, so that way then I know how to do it online, on stream, and I don't look like a doofus trying to figure stuff out. So that is going to wrap up our show for this week. I know it was a little light on topics, but it was normally when we have a Nintendo Direct episode, it basically encompasses like all of the news, and we end up spending like twice as much time as we normally do. But thank you all for joining me. If you want to see more content from 8-Bit Adventures, be sure to check out 8-bitadventures.com. Over there, you can find artwork, comics, podcasts, streams, and more. I still have to work on getting my Bowser's Fury playthrough uploaded. So that is coming. It's not on the site yet. If you want to help support that content, you can do so by becoming a patron at patreon.com/8bitadventures. Patrons get access to this Tales of Jamora artwork, early access to comics, exclusive behind-the-scenes sort of game mechanics content, and more. And you can get all of that, most of that for as little as $1 a month, some of it for as little as $2 a month. And finally, our opening theme is One Up by Professor Shy Guy. You can find his work over at professorshyguy.bandcamp.com. And with that, that's going to wrap up our episode for this week. So again, thank you all for joining me. Thank you for your support. And be sure to let Courtney know what your thoughts on all this stuff are next week when she's back. So as always, have fun, everyone. Happy gaming, and enjoy your pie cake.